Hi everyone! Welcome to today's episode of Remarkable Spirit, Memories of a Medium. My name is Gabrielle Gardner, and I am a medium. This means that I see, feel, and hear the souls of those who no longer reside in a physical body. They are in the non-physical, or in more traditional terms, they have died. Death, as I have come to know it through my personal experiences with spirit, most definitely is not the end. It simply is the turning of a page after completing a chapter. In today's episode, I would like to introduce you to two remarkable spirits, two young children who lost their lives much too soon. I would like to honor them all with you today by sharing their memories with you. And while they did lose their lives to a violent incident, which I know is hard to look at and hard to talk about, we must talk about it so that we can then do our part to make sure that this does not happen to any other souls. Throughout this episode, we will be showing you how you can help children experiencing abuse or violence, bullying, or they're not having their needs, their basic needs of safety and shelter met. So we'll be showing those throughout this episode. Spirit has shown that it is our duty as human beings to help all other sentient beings. That is one of our roles while we are here in a physical vessel. We must do our part to help others. So let us together do what we can to honor these two young lives by talking about what has happened to them and what we can do to make sure that it doesn't happen again. And remember that there is power in numbers, and we can together make a difference. For the sake of privacy, I have changed their names to James and Derek. So I want to reiterate that all mediums connect to spirit in different ways, and the way that I connect to spirit is through my guides, always. And my guides have shown me so many souls that are residing in an eternal place of happiness where they have been reconnected with their loved ones, and they feel warmth and they feel peace. But my guides have also shown me that there is another place that is partially here and partially there, and it is an in-between space. And souls only reside here temporarily, and there are many different reasons why they end up in this place, but almost exclusively and entirely, it is the result of unprocessed emotions and unprocessed trauma. And this is the case with James. So now I'm going to be telling you a little bit more about James, because this is the story of how my guides and his guides work together to move him from the in-between space to the place after this place. The place where souls are meant to reside. I was on the way home from my grandpa's house February 22nd around 1 a.m. I'm from a family of night owls, so this is nothing new. My mom was driving and I was in the passenger seat. And at the base of the hill by our house, I felt the soul of a young boy enter into my energy. It felt like he was from the 1960s, and I could see that he was wearing a white t-shirt and dark blue shorts, and he was tall and gangly, and I would guess that he was around 10 or 11 years old. I got a spirit download from one of my guides, and I knew that he had died outside in the summer from something that felt like an allergy or asthma. I wasn't sure at that time. He wore glasses too, which I could feel, and for a moment while we were in the car, it was like he was seeing through my eyes. And he was seeing the road where we were, and he was trying to figure out where he was. He just kept repeating the phrase, "Where is my home? I want to go home." I told him that he couldn't communicate with me in that way of seeing through my eyes without my permission. And so I pushed his energy outside of mine. And when I did that, he gave off the energy of a young boy's anger. And I saw him do something that was like stomping his foot and crossing his arms. So I asked my guides why James wasn't connecting with his guides and wasn't connecting with his family and spirit. They again showed me this impression of him stomping his foot and crossing his arms, and that's when I knew that it was James's anger that was getting in the way and preventing him from moving to the next place. He was very much choosing to stay. I was too tired that night, and he wasn't ready to stay with guides, so I did something I'd never done before. I asked some of my own family members in spirit to take care of him. I called on my great Aunt Marie and my great Uncle Stan, and I asked if they could watch over him for a couple of nights. They happily agreed, as I knew they would, and they were more than happy to babysit this grumpy little kid. And while he began processing his anger and letting go of his anger, I could see over the course of a few days images of him and my great aunt and uncle and one of our family dogs sitting in a grassy field. And I truly believe that this is where he did most of his healing, just sitting in this peaceful place that he hadn't seen for a while. But James had a lot of anger to let go of in that 1 week, and he often came into our home and let himself be known, just like the grumpy little kid that he was. He knocked a basket off a rocking chair in our basement and scared the bejesus out of my dad. And the next day, he knocked some papers off of my dad's table, almost in a temper tantrum kind of way. All 3 of my dogs also seemed to be very aware of his presence in our home and watched him move through our dining room. Again, he was just there making noises like a child who was trying to get our attention. And every time something like that would happen, I would tell James that he couldn't do that and he needed to go be with my aunt and uncle, and the activity would immediately stop. I did that every time. So after a week, I woke up and the guides told me that it was James's time, that he was ready. So I gathered the materials and set up the healing grid with my guide Lokai. And that would allow James to finish processing his big anger and connect with his guides. And while making the grid, James showed me more about his life. He showed me what had happened. He showed me that his parents had died just 1 year before he had in a car crash, and that for some reason he had been handed off to the next door neighbors. I believe this is because he didn't have any close family in the area. The family next door already had 7 or 8 children, and James's life dramatically changed. It was a 180 from the experience that he was having with his own family. He had been in a house with 2 kind, loving parents, and suddenly he was in a home where he was constantly yelled at, corporal punishment was common, and the family didn't have much money, so James always got the last picks and the leftovers. James was told that he was a burden, and he was bullied by the other kids in the home too. He also was never given room to grieve his parents and process his loss, and his grief is what turned into this big anger. His life had suddenly become a nightmare, and he was so angry about it. The phrase that he had kept repeating on that first night that I met him, "Where is my home? I just want to go home now," suddenly made a lot more sense, because that was what he was feeling at the time of his passing. Guides then showed me how James died, and as I was laying out the grid with Lokai, I saw what had happened. It was a hot summer day, and he had been stung by a bee and had an anaphylactic reaction. And as his airway closed with swelling, James experienced a lot of fear, and he had desperately tried to reach out to the other kids who were playing around him. He asked the other kids to help him, and they just ignored him and left him there in the grass, and that's where he died. James was understandably so angry about his life changes and the way that the new family had treated him, especially as he was dying. And he wasn't able to let go of that anger until this moment with his guides. The guides facilitated all of this. His anger had truly become a blinding rage that prevented him from even seeing his parents who were waiting for him and trying to connect to him. And as I finished the grid with my guides, I felt his parents' energy approaching. And after a few moments, James could see them too. And time is very different for those in spirit, so it hadn't felt like it was this long for him, but he had missed them. So he had moved enough of his anger that his energy lifted high enough to be able to see his parents. And that was all it took, just a glimpse of them. He saw them and ran towards them and jumped into their arms, and just as fast as they had come, they were gone. So James transitioned just like that. And once a soul is able to move whatever is blocking their path, the emotions, whatever they're not able to let go of, it's instant. This process of moving from the in-between to the place where they're meant to be, it's instant, every single time. So I'm incredibly grateful that I got to meet James, and I'm glad that you know him now too. Please, if you know children who are experiencing violence or abuse in any form, do what you can and check out these resources that are shown during this program. Reach out, be a whistleblower. You could save someone's life. So do your part and make a difference in someone's life. Now I would like to tell you about another remarkable young soul that I met. He was able to, with the assistance of guides and angels, shift his thoughts so that he could again instantly move to the place that comes after this place. This is my experience with Derek, a very young boy who experienced too much violence. Violence that a young child should never know. But he was able to be moved to a place of light and love by his guides. Derek was brought into my energy late one night last winter, and he was temporarily in this in-between space. He had experienced extreme violence, and he was still working on processing this trauma. And it was the guides who allowed him to help see that he was worthy of love. When Derek came into my awareness, I could see that he was young, only 8 or 9 years old. He was very short, small-statured, very skinny. He had dark brown, scruffy hair, and he looked very sad. He looked defeated. And I knew that he was very tired, too, at the time of his passing. It is important to remember that time is very different. So if a soul gets caught in the moment of passing temporarily, they hold that energy, and then the second that it moves, that energy passes, and it was as if no time at all had passed for them. So while it is uncomfortable to see souls sometimes experiencing a negative emotion, it is instant that that feeling is released when they move to the next place. So now I will be reading about my experience with Derek from my journal. It was evident that Derek had experienced extreme violence, and I didn't really know what to do. I never know what to do in these circumstances with young souls. And so as always, I had to give it up to Spirit, and the guides walked me through this 100% of the way. So when I saw him and saw that he had awareness of me, I gently asked him if he knew where his family was. He was looking down at the floor, and he wouldn't look at me. Within seconds, I could feel that he was deeply traumatized, and most likely had experienced abuse. Just as we can see the signs on a living child, I could see it in Derek. I asked him if he knew where he was, and he simply said, "Not really." And again, not looking up, he told me that he had been afraid. I told him to wait just a minute and went to go get the toys that I often use to help kids feel more comfortable until they are ready to connect to their guides and angels. I set the toy cars out, and I felt his energy relax. I asked if he knew what had happened to him, and he said yes, but I don't want to talk about that. I said, "That's okay, Derek, you don't have to. Just stay here for a minute." He didn't respond, and I went to get some of the supplies that I use to create a space of peace for souls who need to release some of the trauma to make room for the light of the guides. Sometimes when a soul is so resistant to the energy of love from the guides and the angels, as Derek was, it's important to give them a space to let go of whatever they're carrying. So that's what this was. I was creating a space, just like we set a space to process our trauma. He needed that too. So I brought the supplies back and I set it up with Lokai so that he could process what he needed to move in order to go with the guides. And as I laid the grid out, I felt his energy begin to soften, and he seemed less stiff. I asked Derek if he could see the guides, and he said yes. I said, "That's great. Would you like to go with them?" I could tell that he knew what I meant, but he shook his head. And I asked him, "Why not?" He said, "Because they aren't here for me." I said, "Yes, they are. They are here just for you, to celebrate with you and take you to a place that is more amazing and fun than you could ever imagine." And he said, "They can't be here for me. I'm not good enough." He said, "I'm no good at all." The reason that I'm so emotional about this is just a child should never feel this feeling of not being loved and of not being good. And when I connect to spirit, I feel some of their emotions very deeply, and his was so deep. He believed this to his core. And that's just something that, again, no child should ever experience. So I felt his energy becoming more cold and distant as he talked about feeling like he was unworthy of love, a feeling like he was no good at all. So I backed off, not wanting him to leave. I asked my guides for help in understanding what he meant. It was then that I was shown images of violence, a man beating Derek, pushing him against walls, slapping him, shoving him to the ground, and kicking him repeatedly. I felt the impression of bones breaking and not being able to move, and I felt fear. I heard a man screaming horrible things and understood then that Derek had been told over and over, probably for most of his life, that he was a burden, and he was stupid, and he got in the way, and he had made the man do what he did. I told my guides to stop. I didn't want to see anymore. I came back to the present moment, and I looked at Derek, who was still sitting with the toy cars, and for the first time he looked up slightly, but still not making eye contact. He knew I had seen what had happened to him. And I said, "I'm so sorry, Derek. You didn't do anything wrong." And he said, "Yes, I did." I said, "No, Derek, you didn't. Your dad was wrong. You are good. You are so good. You are loved, and you have to know that. Your dad was wrong to hurt you and say those things. Listen to what the guides are telling you." And for the first time, he looked up at me and looked into my eyes. He looked sad, but I felt his energy shifting. I said, "Derek, your dad wasn't healthy and his mind wasn't working right. You are good and so kind. You're so good and so kind that your dad didn't know what to do with you. He didn't know how to love you. But I promise you, there are so many people who love you, who are waiting now. You just need to follow the guides." He looked at me and said, "I don't know how to go." I said, "Derek, look over there. That's an angel. And she just showed up here for you." She just showed up here for you. She feels like the brightest, warmest, most beautiful light that you can ever imagine. Can you see her?" He looked in that direction, and I saw color begin to return to his pale complexion, and I knew that he could see her, and I knew that the transition was starting. I said, "Derek, you didn't do anything wrong. They wouldn't be here if you had." Now, that wasn't exactly true because they're always there, but I needed Derek to know in that moment that he was okay. Derek stood up, and I could see him looking past me, and I knew that he could see the bright light that they all see when the angels and guides create the path to the next place, the place of peace. I said, "You can go now, Derek. They're waiting for you." His face had relaxed and lightened to a peaceful expression, and he wasn't looking at the ground. His face wasn't tight with the sadness it had held just a few minutes prior, and he looked at me for just a minute, and then I felt his energy pass by, and he was gone. He had followed the angel and the guides to the place where he was meant to be. Derek's life was taken by the hands of his violent father. His life was ended in a way that far too many end. His dad had told him over and over again that he was worthless and unlovable, so much so that Derek believed it, even in death temporarily, until the guide showed him the truth. The truth that he did not need to earn love, that he was good, and that he deserved to be loved. He deserved so much better than what this life had given him. Spirit is remarkable. Derek is remarkable. And you are remarkable. So if you know anyone who is suffering in the storm of domestic violence, please do your part and reach out. Be a whistleblower. You can seriously save somebody's life. You will make a difference. And if you yourself are experiencing abuse or violence in any form, know that you are capable of breaking those cycles today. Know that you deserve better. You are not ever responsible for making anyone hurt you, and you deserve to be loved. You are worthy of love. You are good, you are strong, and you are lovable. You are here for a reason. The world needs your light. So let us together remember the two beautiful lights that are James and Derek. James is now reunited with his family, with his parents, experiencing the love that he will forever know. And Derek is happily playing and experiencing the bliss and joy that he should have had in this life, but now gets to experience for eternity. So thank you for taking the time to listen to James and Derek's stories, and please let them inspire you to make a difference in someone's life. As always, I am humbled and I am honored to be able to do this work with Spirit, and I'm eternally grateful to the guides and the angels and the source from which we all came. My name is Gabrielle Gardner, and this has been another episode of Remarkable Spirit. Please join us again next time to hear more about how Remarkable Spirit is all around us.